Hello, my name is Francesco Ciabattoni and I'm a professor of Italian at Georgetown University. Today, I'm going to talk about days 4 and 5 in Boccaccio's Decameron. Days 4 and 5 are dedicated to the theme of love. Debating love, its nature, origin, effects, and value was a frequent literary theme in medieval Europe, and Boccaccio comes after a long tradition of such works as Andreas Capellanus's De Amore, Guido Cavalcanti's Donna me prega, Dante's Divine Comedy, Convivio and Vita Nuova, but also Juan Ruiz's El Libro de Buen Amor. Boccaccio himself, who certainly knew well at least Capellanus, Cavalcanti, and Dante, had already treated the subject of love in his earlier narrative, such as Il Filocolo and Il Filostrato. In Filocolo, Boccaccio staged a discussion about love among Neapolitan aristocratic youths, while in the Filostrato he tells the tragic love story of Troilus and Criseyde, which Geoffrey Chaucer will rewrite, as we know. By the way, Filostrato, the Italian title of Boccaccio's work, is also the name of the protagonist, the king, of day 4, the day that is dedicated to tragic loves in Boccaccio's Decameron. The word, the name, Filostrato, means he who was conquered, defeated by love. Day 5 in the Decameron is, on the contrary, dedicated to loves that end up happily. So there is this diptych, this pair of days that constitute one, the evolution, and the opposite of the other. The reason that love was so highly considered and studied in the Middle Ages is that it was believed that love could bring spiritual and moral transformation in the individual, a transformation that could lead either to death and perdition or to happiness and salvation. As you have realized by reading Christine de Pizan, some of Boccaccio's stories re-elaborate previous models or influenced later works, including the most famous and final tale of the Decameron, the story of Griselda. This story was recast not only again by Christine de Pizan, Petrarch, Chaucer, but many other works by Boccaccio have inspired famous works of world literature. I'm just going to show the titles. I'm not going to read them all, but you can see how Chaucer and Shakespeare are present, and then Moliere, and then John Keats, and others. But why is it so important to observe this net of reciprocal borrowings and influences? Why is it important that one author may refer to another and one work opens a dialogue with another work? Sometimes a text is just so successful that it acquires wide popularity around the world. And that may be the case of the Griselda story, for example. Some other times, an author might want to retell a story with a slightly different angle from the previous edition of that story. Or he or she might want to inscribe his or her work into the context of a tradition. In 1919, T.S. Eliot wrote an essay titled Tradition and the Individual Talent, in which he presented a complex and unusual idea of tradition, which involved something he described as the historical sense. The historical sense is a perception of the pastness of the past, but also of its presence. For Eliot, past works of art form an order or a tradition. However, that order, that tradition, is always being altered by a new work which modifies the tradition to make room for itself. This view, in which the past should be altered by the present as much as the present is directed by the past, requires that a poet be familiar with almost all literary history, and not just the immediate past, but the distant past and not just the literature of his or her own country, but the whole mind of Europe. And these are mind of Europe are, of course, Eliot's words. And today we know that it is not just about Europe. We are able to expand that discourse and identify lines and bridges that go from all the world's literature into the Western canon and vice versa. That means that a work of art, be it literature, music, painting, or what have you, can never be fully understood and appreciated unless it is placed in the context of a tradition. And this is why knowing traditions is important. Tradition is not an end in itself. It's not to be accepted passively, but it should be known so that we can critique it and innovate it, and therefore we study it. In order to sample and understand hands-on what this theory means, I propose a close reading offered by Pier Massimo Forni, who was professor of Italian at Johns Hopkins University. This close reading is on the first tale of the Decameron, Day 4, and vis-a-vis, particularly, the Ovidian episode of Myrrha and Cinyras in the Metamorphoses. Let's summarize briefly Ovid's story first. Myrrha is in love with her father Cinyras, king of Cyprus. She refuses all suitors he finds for her. She eventually bet-tricks her father Cinyras and sleeps with him. When Cinyras learns that he has slept with his daughter, he tries to kill her, but she manages to escape. She prays the gods for mercy, is turned into a myrrh tree, and as a tree, she begets a child, Adonis. Sounds familiar yet? It looks pretty closely like a reversal of Decameron 4:1. Pier Massimo Forni showed the intertextual links between Boccaccio's story of Tancredi and Gismonda with such a famous work as Ovid's Metamorphoses. These textual borrowings and echoes indicate that Boccaccio is recasting the incestuous story of Myrrha, who falls in love with her own father, Cinyras, but Boccaccio does so to shift the focus in his story. Boccaccio presents the case of Princess Gismonda, a noble, intelligent, and brave woman, as an exemplification of the lovesick women to whom he dedicates the Decameron, as he says in the preface or proemio. This is an important case in point. Even the wealthy and the aristocratic can die of love. Gismonda is princess of Salerno. She's the daughter of Tancredi, who is the ruler, the prince, in the great city of Salerno in the south of Italy. So she exemplifies one of the women who are oppressed by the patriarchal society. I am going to try and propose to you a few short passages from this Boccaccian tale. This is how Boccaccio introduces the character. Tancredi, principe di Salerno, fu signore assai umano e di benigno ingegno. Se egli nell'amoroso sangue, nella sua vecchiezza, non s'avesse le mani bruttate, il quale in tutto lo spazio della sua vita non ebbe che una figliuola, e più felice sarebbe stato se quella avuta non avesse. And this is how Ovid describes Cinyras, the king of Cyprus. Cinyras was her son, Paphos' son, that is, and had he been without offspring, might have been counted happy. So this is already an initial similarity. It's just a phrase that is placed there at the point when the author describes the characters. But there is a little more as we continue reading through Boccaccio's tale and Ovid's Metamorphoses. I'm reading the original Italian and then, of course, can read the translation. The pick of princes desire you. From the whole Orient, young men are here vying for your couch. Out of them all, choose one as your husband, Mira. Only let not the one be among the many. These are Cinera's recommendations to his daughter. And in the voice of the narrator, in the voice of the female protagonist, Vismonda, in Boccaccio's tale, says to her father, Guiscardo non per accidente tolsi, come molte fanno, ma con deliberato consiglio elessi innanzi a ogni altro. Gismonda, just like Mira, shows her judgment, her wisdom in choosing a lover who, if not noble, is noble at heart, placing emphasis on the nobility of the heart, a central theme in the Italian still novel poetry since Guido Cavalcante and Dante Alighieri. Let's continue reading the two texts side by side. Ovid has, O gods, says Mira, I pray you, and piety and the sacred rights of parents, keep this sin from me, and fight off my crime, if indeed it is a crime. But I am not sure, for piety refuses to condemn such love as this. We have something similar in Boccaccio's Decameron when Gismonda gives her courtiers her noble speech. She says, se tu nella tua estrema vecchiezza a far quello che giovane non usasti, cioè a incrudelir, sei disposto, usa in me la tua crudeltà, la quale a alcun priego porgerti disposta non sono, siccome in prima cagione di questo peccato, se peccato è. These textual indicators are not small details. They show us that Boccaccio wished to modernize his narrative, but did so by reusing blocks of an existing tale. In Boccaccio's Decameron 4:1, it is Tancredi who harbors a possessive, almost incestuous desire for his daughter. And that, unrestrained, leads everyone to a tragic end. In Pier Massimo Forni's words, something new can be found in old, venerable, and extensively interpreted texts. And then, if we use a modicum of common sense and average acquaintance with Boccaccio's work and his modus operandi in Inventio, and a little familiarity with the work of Ovid, who was Boccaccio's great Latin idol, we can extract more meaning from Boccaccio's new tale. Boccaccio's tale also reuses a topos, a recurring situation of medieval narrative, that of the Eden heart. At the end of the tragic tale, Tancredi has Guiscardo killed and serves his heart on a silver dish for Gismonda to eat it. She realizes what he has done and whose heart that is. So she eats it, but first she puts poison over it so that she will die with that last meal. As I said, this is a topos that we encounter in several other works, especially in the medieval period. Among them are the Lady Niort, the Roman de Châtelain de Coussillet et la Dame de Faël, Dante's Vita Nuova, and another tale by in Boccaccio's own Decameron, tale 4:9, the one about Guglielmo Guardastagno and Guglielmo Rossiglione. And by the way, for the fans, in Game of Thrones, Daenerys eats a raw horse heart. But this tale of the Eden heart has its origin in an ancient Indian tale that speaks about King Rasalu of Punjab, and then has its story, its evolution into European narrative, all the way down to Giovanni Boccaccio. So the eating of the heart is an important detail that we have to keep into consideration when we analyze, in particular, Decameron 4:1 and Decameron 5:4. the story of Caterina di Valbona and the Nightingale. These two stories, in days 4 and 5 of the Decameron, are interconnected. When we read in, for one, Tancredi and Gismonda, the reaction of Tancredi to his daughter's speech, we read the following words with a summary of the barbarous act of killing. Conobbe il prince la grandezza dell'animo della sua figliola, ma non credette perciò in tutto lei sì fortemente disposta a quello che le parole sue sonavano, come diceva, perché da lei partitosi e da sé rimosso di volere in alcuna cosa nella persona di lei incrudelire, pensò con gli altrui danni raffreddare il suo fervente amore e comandò ai due che Guiscardo guardavano che senza alcun rumore lui la seguente notte strangolassero e, trattogli il cuore, a lui recassero. When we read Decameron 5:4, the story of Caterina di Valbona, those words are strangely resonating. When we read Ricciardo's plea, Ricciardo is Caterina's boyfriend, lover. When we hear Ricciardo's plea as he and Caterina get caught by her father Lizio on the terrace, completely naked, after having spent the night together, we realize that there is something between those two stories that we should look at closely. Even if we are now in the day dedicated to felicitously ended loves, the exchange between Caterina and Ricciardo, the two young lovers who meet secretly and make love, is tinged with the somber hue of tragedy. Here are Ricciardo's words, and then Caterina's response. Caterina, io ti prego che tu non mi facci morire amando. La giovane rispose subito, volesse Dio che tu non facessi più morir me. Questa risposta, molto di piacere e d'ardire, aggiunse a Ricciardo e dissele, per me non starà mai cosa che a grado ti sia, ma a te sta il trovar modo allo scampo della tua vita e la mia. Against the backdrop of the previous day when lovers really did die for love, the traditional phraseology acquires a parodic connotation. Philostrato, narrator of this tale in day 5 and also king of day 4, is depicting two characters who feel dangerously close to that tragic world. In particular because the queen of day 5 is Fiammetta, who is also the narrator of 4-1, the story of Tancredi and Gismonda. These elements question the tale's placement. I'm talking about 5-4, so the tale of Caterina and Ricciardo. These elements question the tale's placement in the world of the happy ending love narrative. Part of the narrator's strategy is to play a rhetorical game along the borders between the fictional and the structural. And a little later, we encounter a scene with eerie overtones when they are caught on the terrace by Caterina's father, Lizio. Nei guari dopo queste parole stettero, that is Caterina's parents, stood, che Ricciardo si svegliò e veggendo che il giorno era chiaro si tenne morto e chiamò la Caterina dicendo «Oimè, anima mia, come faremo che il giorno è venuto e hammi qui colto?» Alle quali parole messer Lizio, venuto oltre e levata alla sargia, rispose «Farem bene». Quando Ricciardo li vide, parve che gli fosse il cuore del corpo strappato. E levatosi a sedere sul letto, disse «Signor mio, io richeggio mercè per Dio. Io conosco, siccome disleale e malvagio uomo, aver meritata morte, e perciò fate di me quello che più vi piace. Ben vi prego io, se esser può, che voi abbiate della mia vita mercè e che io non muoia. We must focus on the commonplace phrase, parve che gli fosse il cuore del corpo strappato. He thought his heart was being ripped out. Because this phrase has a special resonant literalness for whomever has read the story in day 4. Tancredi's actions in 4-1 had an element of savagery that went beyond killing the boy and maiming his corpse. Philostrato in his story reverses the process. He reinstates the heart within the boundaries of metaphorical discourse, but as he does so, he takes us back to the tragic extraction of Guiscardo's heart in Fiammetta's story. Philostrato's story in day 5 responds to Fiammetta's story in day 4, not only at the level of content, but also at that of rhetorical artifice, the oscillation between the literal and the metaphorical. Having established that Philostrato, on the day when Fiammetta is queen, narrates a story which responds to the one told by Fiammetta on the day when he was king, we may in turn wonder whether Fiammetta's choice in her own day is of dialogical nature as well. This is a dialogue between storytellers and between the codified genres of tragic and comic literature. Comic literature meaning stories with a happy ending, as in Dante's Divine Comedy. There's nothing comedic, or very little comedic, perhaps, about Dante's Commedia. It is a commedia because it ends well. Each genre, tragedy and comedy, had its own rules and its own tradition. By recalling the previous day's tragedies in the reader's minds, Philostrato gives the characters a ghostly awareness of their own situation within the storytelling. Thanks to a daring artifice, we see in Caterina and Ricciardo a reborn Gismonda and Guiscardo, who cast off the shroud of tragedy as they warily cross into the world where love is supposed to end happily. And I have been using Pier Massimo Forni's words for some of my lecture, which I am going to end in a minute, just after I address you to say that I hope you now start realizing the power of fiction, how it can control emotions, memory, reader's response, and even turn reality upside down with the power of reference and literary memory. Thank you for your attention.